Hey folks, this is Kelani. As we're all wandering around the new islands exploring the new content in our latest chapter of the World of Warcraft, I can't help but wonder, what comes next? I know you might say something along the lines of, Kelani, chill out, we've only been here a week or so, what's the rush? But I'm not really talking about content. Okay, I kind of am, but what I'm more interested in is story. Where does this current chain of events take us? What chapter comes next in our current adventure? We know a few key points, and we can speculate about a few more, but we don't actually know where this expansion will end up, which is super exciting to me. For a while now, we actually have kind of known what the overarching themes of each expansion were going to be. Warlords had us fighting back the Iron Horde and trying to stop Gul'dan, which ultimately failed, but we did take down Archimonde, so we've got that going for us. That led quite quickly into Legion, where the Burning Legion finally arrived in all of their flaming glory. We knew the Tomb of Sargeras was a key focal point, but our initial assault didn't go too well. After that, we sort of regrouped, the class halls took over, and we did a little bit of cleaning up on the Broken Isles. We took care of the Emerald Dream issue at Shalaldrassil and taught the Nightborn that making a deal with the devil can get you burned pretty badly. After stopping Gul'dan and reclaiming the Eye of Aman'Thul, we figured it was about time to get back to that tomb. After pushing through horror after horror, we eventually took down the second big bad of the Burning Legion, Kil'jaeden. So with Archimonde and Kil'jaeden dealt with, the only huge name left was Sargeras. I don't think anyone thought we would actually be facing Sargeras himself, so the way Antorus worked was pretty interesting. That was a twist that many of us just didn't expect, especially the part about the Titans being more or less imprisoned. So releasing them and locking up Sargeras was a cool way to end the expansion, but stopping the Burning Legion was kind of what the entire expansion has been about. So what about Battle for Azeroth? On the face of things, we're just back to war. Alliance vs Horde, blue vs red, we level up on different islands, we have completely different quests and storylines. The new war mode gives us plenty of reasons to actually attack each other. Even the expansion's dungeons are spread out enough for us to have to wander into enemy territories to get everything done. It's not really something we've seen for a while now, especially with the events that led up to this expansion, the burning of Teldrassil and this sacking of the Undercity. If nothing else, they definitely want to sell this expansion as faction conflict. But there are whispers here and there, telling us there's a deeper meaning to the battle for Azeroth. Maybe there's something else we should be worried about. Well, I say whispers, but oh my gosh, that Azshara Warbringer's short kind of blew everything apart. I mean, let's be honest, we knew this was going to be an Old Gods expansion for a variety of reasons. If they were trying to hide it, they didn't do a particularly great job. There's one dungeon I'm thinking of in particular, a dungeon where you actually get a little guest appearance by one of our favourite little fishy friends. But the Warbringer short just took that and ran away with it. I guess that's the reason they were holding on to it as long as they did. Queen Azshara and her deal with N'Zoth will shape the future of Battle for Azeroth for sure. But what's that going to look like? What's the end game here for both sides? From a story point of view, the expansion is progressing quite nicely. The main threat to Zandalar was this strange blood god called G'huun. The blood trolls of Nazmir were following this creature and praising its power. All shall bow before the power of G'huun. The typical old god nonsense. The only thing keeping G'huun locked away was 3 seals, one in Nazmir, one in Vol'dun, and one in Zuldazar. As it turns out, 2 of them had already been destroyed by the time we got there. We kind of figured this all out a little too late, and by the time we knew what we needed to defend, well, let's just say we know how G'huun gets out. So obviously, as the glorious adventurers and heroes of Azeroth that we are, we delve into the Titan facility of Uldir to make sure we clean up after ourselves. That's the end of that raid tier and the end of that chapter. How does the next one start, and will it be the chapter revolving around Queen Azshara? I would hedge my bets that's exactly what it's going to be, partly because the dev team said at BlizzCon last year that Queen Azshara is going to be the Gul'dan of Battle for Azeroth, and partly because I have no idea what else they would bring up for an entire patch cycle. If some other random old god creature thing pops up from under the sands of Vol'dun, okay, cool I guess, let's deal with that before moving on to Queen Azshara, but I really would be surprised if we start to build up to Azshara next. If you remember back to the patch cycles of Legion, we always had alternate patches of raid releases and new world content. Patch 7.1 opened up Suramar a little more, and then in 7.15 we got the Nighthold raid. 7.2 introduced the Broken Shore, 7.25 was the Tomb of Sargeras, and 7.3 opened up Argus. We didn't get to play in Antorus until 7.35, but we had been working up to it for several months. With that patch cycle being so incredibly successful for the game, I doubt they would deviate too far from a working strategy. So I would expect patch 8.1 to introduce some new areas to explore because we don't really have much room to work with anymore. We already had Suramar in Legion, we don't really have anything like Suramar in BFA right from the get-go. They could introduce some more quests and story in some other zones, but I feel like a new chapter usually needs a new area to tell the story. So 8.1 brings in the story and world events that lead up to the 815 raid, which will probably be the Queen Azshara raid. But where could this entire patch cycle take place? I think there's only two places where this story could continue. The first is actually in Stormsong Valley. The High Priests over there seem to have a few too many connections to both Azshara and the Old Gods right now. Get it together, Alliance players, your lord and ladies are all being corrupted. Some are turning into tree monsters while others are literally tentacle faces. No offense to any Draenei out there. So a new island could pop up off the shores of Stormsong, or parts of the zone could be changed entirely. I still think new areas to explore are more likely, so an island or a chain of islands popping up might be the way to go. Stormsong seems to be the place most closely connected to the Old Gods right now, and it would balance out the fact of Uldir being on Horde turf. I thought it was a little bit weird when I saw that the first raid tier would be located on the Horde Island, but I guess it's got to be located somewhere. It would make sense to balance that out and have the second raid tier on the Alliance's side. If that raid ends up being filled with Naga and potentially ending with Azshara herself, Stormsong makes sense. But there is another option. I'm not too sure how it would end up working, but our battlefield might actually be right smack bang in the middle of our two faction islands, right in between Zandalar and Kul Tiras. Why? Because it would be cool, and kind of makes sense. There's been a post or two on Reddit and also over on Wowhead about how N'Zoth could be right in between these two islands. It would certainly explain why we can see the Old Gods' influence in both Kul Tiras and in Zandalar, and can have some really cool implications for later on down the line. There's two underwater cities that we know of that are of interest here, Nazjatar and Ny'alotha. Nazjatar is the city Queen Azshara and her Forsaken Naga created under the waves, but that's supposedly at the bottom of the Maelstrom. That's a little far from where we're currently throwing spears at each other, so what about that second one? Ny'alotha, the city everyone is probably going to be correcting my pronunciation of. It's got another name if you're curious. The Sleeping City. There are so many whispers about this sleeping city, from various sources like the Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron to our favourite little riddler, Il'gynoth. I wonder if we'll see Il'gynoth again, or maybe some part of him. When he dies, he says, "N'Zoth, I journey to Ny'alotha." There's this huge tie between the city and N'Zoth, and we know N'Zoth is still imprisoned, or at least he was the last time we checked. According to Xal'atath, he's been breaking free ever so slowly. We know his prison sunk to the bottom of the seas during the Shattering. He's buried beneath the waves. If N'Zoth was buried in the middle of his great bastion and the entire thing ended up at the bottom of the ocean, Ny'alotha could be both his prison and his seat of power. If this city lies beneath the ocean right between our two islands, well, we've seen plenty of islands rise from the depths before. We'll ignore places like Pandaria, Kul Tiras and Zandalar, which seemingly popped out of nowhere, even though we're to believe they were here all along. But the Tumos Zagros was at the bottom of the ocean once upon a time, and was raised during the Warcraft 3 campaign. It's not super crazy to think that the Naga would have the power to raise a city from the ocean's floor, which might just and so happen to bridge the land gap between Kul Tiras and Zandalar. Sure, we're taking a boat back and forth for now, but what if later on we could simply run from Zandalar to Kul Tiras, albeit through a mob of hellish old god minions and whatnot, but that could still be really cool. We would even have a Horde base of operations on one side, the United Island of Zandalar, and an Alliance base on the other side, a cleansed Kul Tiras. We could even race to the middle of this new landmass if we're still not working together at that point. I think it opens up some really great gameplay possibilities. This could be N'Zoth's first steps to rebuilding the Black Empire too, covering the world in darkness and corrupting every living thing. Azshara is just another pawn in his pocket. Or maybe she'll end up proving to be a little more interesting by the time we next meet her. The only problems I would have with this whole thing is that it doesn't really sound like a patch 8.1. If Ny'alotha does rise from the depths and bridges the gap between our islands, that kinda sounds like an Argus type deal, especially with the Sleeping City tied so closely to N'Zoth. I don't think we're going to see N'Zoth for a while. He'll either be an 8.2 or maybe even an 8.3 patch of the expansion. Third last boss or maybe even last boss. It's all pretty much a guessing game at this point, but it's still fun to lay everything out on a map and see how it works. So for patch 8.1, we could see some new islands pop up somewhere off of Stormsong. Maybe it could even be introduced by the Island Expedition system. A random chance to find a super special island with unique monsters and a little bit of a storyline. That could be really cool and lead up to a real Queen Azshara event in an interesting way. It could also just be tacked on somewhere in Stormsong Valley. I hope we get some new areas to explore though. I'm sorely missing that Suramar experience of a max level only zone with a fully fleshed out storyline. I don't think the raids would be as enjoyable without a really great lead-up. A fantastic surprise would be heading down to Nazjatar, because that's supposed to be Azshara's seat of power. The reinforcements she was sending up to the Broken Isles were coming directly from Nazjatar. If we're finally tackling the leader of the Naga, it kind of makes sense to do it in the city of the Naga, but getting there might be a bit of a concern. The Maelstrom isn't that far away, I guess, but it's also not really that close either. Something big would have to happen to divert our attention away from our little faction islands and towards the Maelstrom. That could be a variety of things, but I'm sure it's going to tie into the Tai Sages and Stormsong Valley somehow. I'm super excited to see how that patch unfolds. But one thing to definitely watch out for is some form of huge naval battle. We know the Alliance wanted to secure the aid of the Kulturans for their naval forces, and the same goes for the Horde and enlisting the aid of the Zandalar. Both factions want ships, but there's a really interesting note in Ogmot's Dream Journal. 2 fleets bashing on Ocean of Blood, shadows twisting beneath the ships, Ryzen. If the Alliance and the Horde end up clashing on the waves, you best take note of where it happens. That's going to be a key location for the future of BFA. So later on we might see Ny'alotha rise somewhere between our islands to give us another continent to explore and pillage, and if we're still in the Battle for Azeroth expansion after that, well, who knows, maybe we'll finally take the fight to the Void Lords, or maybe something else will get in our way. I had honestly expected to see more solid information about BFA timeline from Gamescom, but I guess they're saving all of the good stuff for BlizzCon, which at this point is only about 2 months away. That might sound like a bit too long to wait for any patch 8.1 information, but if my memory serves me well, I'm pretty sure the dev team said patch 7.1 in Legion came out a bit too quickly, and that they would want to give players a bit more time in the very first raid of the expansion this time around. So we might have a little bit longer to wait than we did in Legion for some exciting new content. But as I said at the start of this video, we are just over a week in. We've got plenty of time right now. BlizzCon should give us all of the answers we're looking for. Until then, I'm going to go watch the Warbringers shorts again. Where do you think the story will take us next? Where will Queen Azshara's raid take place? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.